I met the Bishop of Ely before Christmas, and we had a great conversation, and we found we had so much in common, I believe, because everything I've always wanted to do as a teacher and as a head teacher is to work with our community of children, teachers, wider community, to do the best we can to enable children to surprise us with their endeavours. And I loved that story that we just heard of the child, where the school discovered what that child was really passionate about, and how when we find out what really excites children and enables children, we find a way through for those children. So as a head teacher, I absolutely loved every single day of being a head. I just loved it. I loved being a teacher, but being a head teacher, working with a school, when I first arrived, that was a school in great difficulty. It was a school that had been put into special measures and hadn't made any progress for 3 years. A school that, at that time, we didn't have Raise Online then, we had the Panda report. And looking around this room, I think some of you will remember the Panda report. So the Panda, the lowest score that you could get on the Panda was E-star. It was almost the sort of kind of perverse celebrity kind of status of E-star. Well, that was where the school was when I joined that school. And all hope had been lost. And I remember looking around the school and thinking, this school should not be like this. This school should not be in this state. The teachers were demoralized. The children were incredibly passive in lessons, apart from the occasional outburst. So within my first week, someone smashed a window during a lesson. We had children running off site. Ofsted had described the children in the school as unteachable. And the teachers were exhausted. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to apply for this headship, first headship. I also probably thought, whatever I do, I can't make it any worse. Anyway, when I went for the interview, I was given the task that's typically given to colleagues, and you probably will have experienced this, many of you educational leaders in the room, asked to present a vision of where was I going to take this school to within 3 years. And so I had a couple of slides for my interview. And I put the name of the school in the centre, and then around the edge I talked about the things that I would do. And the first of those was to create a happy learning community. And then I talked about the breadth of the curriculum, the full breadth of the curriculum, how this was going to be achieved through working together as a team, it was going to be inclusive, and so on. And I said this school was going to become a centre of excellence. And when I said that, I think probably the governors listening to me and the local authority advisor probably thought, bless. But vision is a very powerful thing, and I'm very, very pleased, as I said, to be here today, because the new organisation, the new foundation that is being established here is really important, because we do need to gather together. It is very, very hard to be a teacher. It is very, very hard to be a school leader, because we have so much responsibility for the common good. We have so much responsibility to listen, to try to enable everyone to be the best they can be. Whether that's a colleague working not in the classroom but as part of our school community, whether that is a new teacher, a teacher that's been teaching for a long time, whether that's a child, family, enabling people to be the best they can be is such a privilege. If you think about it, that is kind of the job of teaching. And when I became that head teacher, who'd never been a head teacher before, I just remember thinking, well, these colleagues, these are like my class now. This is like my class of children. And in any class of children, you will all know, there are some that are kind of right there in your face the minute you come in the morning. And there are others that don't even give you eye contact necessarily and are very, very quiet. So there's some potential members of the awkward squad. And then there's some others that look quite diffident and worried. It's the same when you take on a community as a leader. And so I started to work with that community to try to enable them to build confidence. And colleagues, this is not through blame. This is through encouragement, through support, through learning together, through finding the things that we are good at, because everybody, I believe, is good at something. Finding those things that we are good at and fanning the flames of that so that we build that gladness of heart that enables us then to try the things that feel difficult. Asking people to just go in and, take risks doesn't work. People won't just go and take risks. You have to be enabled to take a risk. And I saw my job as a head teacher, as I had as a teacher, to make sure that I kind of metaphorically put my arms around those colleagues in order that those colleagues who had been told they were failures for years were able to start to experience success. Now, I've told you that I just made the decision to leave headship and to take on a new role, which I've just started after Christmas. And that new role is to establish a new professional body for the teaching profession. This is, by any means, a huge challenge because the teaching profession don't know they want a new professional body. They certainly don't know they need to pay for it. And everybody that I told when I was going to apply for the job, and then when I was subsequently appointed to the job, everybody, almost completely to a man, every single one of them said, congratulations, that's a challenge. Now, all of us like a challenge, I guess, but there's a challenge and then there's kind of recklessness. And the only way I can see through trying to create this new organisation is to do this in partnership and to listen and to build with existing networks and new networks like this very exciting initiative that we're talking about today. Because the best things are achieved through partnership, through collaboration, through kindness. I really believe we need more kindness in our educational leadership and our treatment of professionals when the job is so hard. So the new Chartered College of Teaching started work properly just after Christmas in January. We opened our doors 2.5 weeks ago, and I'm delighted to tell you that we already have over 2,000 teachers who have signed up to be part of something that they don't even know what it is yet. This is what it means to gather behind something where you feel that you want to collaborate in order to enhance practice. Because all of us are driven by making things better for children. So I want to share with you a story of a child that I shall always remember. And it is the children, by the way, that make the difference. It's not titles and opportunities, as wonderful as this is to speak at conferences. I know that when I look back over my career, it will be the children that I will be most proud of and that I will think about the most. So this was a child who I first met when he was brought to me by his new foster mother. He'd gone to her as an emergency care because he'd been very badly abused as a baby. He was 3 years old when I met him. He had no language, he couldn't speak. He'd been left mainly in his cot or strapped into a pushchair. He'd come to this foster mother and she brought him across to the school, holding very tightly onto his hand. And she said, "Mrs. Peacock, I would really like to put Miles's name down for your nursery." And I said, "Oh, well, tell me more." And we walked into the nursery, and as we were in there, he kind of broke away from her hand, and he was very, very poorly coordinated, but he sort of kind of walked like this through and out into the foundation stage garden. And as we followed him, the look on his face, that story, sort of the child in a sweet shop, the look on his face was of absolute amazement because he'd never been with other children. And there he was suddenly in our foundation stage garden. And of course, there were all the toys and the sand and all the things you would expect. And he kind of wandered over to one of those wheeled cars. There was a child sitting in the car, and he leant in and he stroked the hair of the child that was in the car. The child looked like this. He got out, and Miles dived in head first through the window of the car like this. Then he was out of the car and then straight over to the playhouse and head first into the playhouse. And I stood and I said to the foster mum, "Actually, children don't start in this nursery until they're 4, but let's bring Miles in straight away." And this is an example of the kind of risk-taking I'm talking about, because actually the rule said you start when you're 4. But your heart says, here's a child who needs to be with other children, he needs to start now. So he had longer than a year in nursery, because that was the amount of time that he had, and then he went into reception. He began to learn to speak. He was echolalic, so he would typically repeat the last thing that you'd said over again. He had some sort of really great fascinations. He was fascinated by hair. Unfortunately, he was also quite fascinated by playing with saliva and wiping it all over his face, which wasn't so attractive. And he became like the class sort of policeman. So whenever the teacher would say, you know, it's time to put away the Play-Doh, he would shout, "Put away Play-Doh!" You know, he became like the boss. He also developed some ritualized behaviors. So the reception classroom was a thoroughfare. We'd have to go through the reception classroom to get to the Year 1 classroom. And he began to feel an absolute need to get up. Any adults who walked through the classroom, he needed to stop them and ask them a set of questions. And they were always about your mummy. You know, where is your mummy? How is your mummy today? These questions. And even if you then walked back through the classroom a couple of moments later, he would need to ask you the same questions again. Indeed, we had a visit from Christine Gilbert, who at that time was the Chief Inspector of Schools. And she had to answer where her mummy was before she was allowed back through the classroom. At the end of the reception year, the educational psychologist and the teachers met together and they said to me, "Alison, we know that you believe in learning without limits. We know that you believe in not labelling any child, but we really feel that Miles is not best served in this school. We don't think we're able to do what we need for him because he's constantly being disrupted. He was beginning to learn letters and so on, but he's constantly disrupted by all of the busyness of this environment." And we were a very, very creative school. I mean, it was the routine was there was no routine. And so reluctantly, I agreed that, yes, he should go to special school. And he left us at the end of reception. The beginning of Year 5, the phone rang. "Hello, Mrs. Peacock. This is the special school. We think Miles is ready to come back now." So I said, "Really?" And in my head, I'd got the Miles, you know, that I was telling you about, and I thought, well, surely how's this going to work? You know, very ambitious school for children, very inclusive, but I was thinking, surely this is going to be very difficult for him. And I said, I really don't think this is the right school. And they said, "Well, we think it is, and he's going to come back." So he did. He came back at the beginning of Year 5, and many of the children remembered him. And his education in the special school had been fantastic. You know, he was now reading and he was writing, and he began to join in with all the full breadth of the curriculum that we offered, the forest school, all the things that we were doing. The beginning of Year 6, he went away on school journey with all the children, giant swing, climbing, all the things that we would do. End of Year 6, took part in the school play. And when we got the results, the SATS results for Miles, he achieved level 5 in every subject, which was just phenomenal. Now, as I was leaving on my last day of being a head teacher, a letter arrived into school. And this is from Miles. "Dear Mrs. Peacock, brackets, Dame. It may be sad that you are leaving, but what God has for you is greater than what you have now. Parting is such sweet sorrow, for once you have left, what you will do will be great. I'm eternally grateful for giving me the second chance to change, considering you could have said no. I may not see you again, but I will always remember what great things you have done for me and others. There is no ceiling, so the sky's the limit. Wroxham will never be the same without you. Our family loves and respects you, and I hope we meet again in the future. Love from Miles. You are truly a Dame." Now, I think the reason we stay doing the job we do is because of the children that we love, the children that we make a difference for. I also think that we are losing far too many colleagues from our profession because we are weighed down with a dutiful sense of marking endless piles of books or ticking endless boxes that are supposed to tell us whether the children are making progress or not. We are a very dutiful profession. We want to do the best for everybody, but I think we've become overloaded with the wrong things. This new organisation, together with the Chartered College of Teaching, is about rebalancing, looking at principle and purpose and research evidence, and doing what we know works for children so that they can have the best possible opportunities in our schools and our colleges and our early years settings. never compromising, but not overloading ourselves with actually the things that just make us feel like we ought to do this because the school down the road says you've got to. We have to gather together, colleagues, to do what's right for us. Because if our teachers have a strong sense of well-being and purpose, then we will be the best teachers that we can be in order that our children can flourish.